All right, good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, December 15th, 2020 regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting. The board has been in closed session since 6 p.m. for items listed on the agenda. Governor Pritzker recently extended the disaster declaration related to the COVID-19 pandemic for all Illinois counties. Based on the current public health concerns, the board president of Elmhurst Community Unit School District number 205, as head of the public body, has determined that it is neither practical nor prudent to hold an in-person public meeting on December 15th, 2020. The board president is further determined that it is not feasible for the public to be present at the public body's regular meeting location due to the health concerns related to COVID-19. This board meeting will be remote and comply with the procedures set forth in Public Act 101-640. Furthermore, due to the pandemic, this meeting will be held virtual. Public viewing and participation will be by electronic means by clicking on the video button found at Board Docs, and it is being live streamed. Okay, we have all 7 board members present, and at this time, I would like us to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Okay, so the best part of this is what we get to do next, which is recognize the York girls cross country team, and it's very lovely to see your faces here. So I'm going to turn it over to board member Beth Hassler, and she is going to recognize you tonight, I believe.
Yes, hi everyone, welcome. So nice to see you all. I just wanted to say a few words. Fortunate enough to be able to recognize our York girls cross country team tonight and all of their accomplishments this year. Our cross country program here in Elmhurst is and always has been like no other. It creates opportunities for students to get involved, feel connected, achieve personal goals, make new friends, and build lasting relationships with other students and mentors. I'd like to share a note that I received from a parent whose daughter was on the team this year, and she wanted to share her thoughts about her experience. She says, the cross-country coaches did such a great job being creative and fostering a team environment this year, despite everything happening around them. They gave the girls somewhere safe to go and something to belong to and somewhere to succeed. The team's collective positive attitude led to an incredibly successful season. The girls ran in pods of 5 to 6, and that pod kind of became their running family. Coaches were so positive and supportive, and the girls in this program are amazing. Supportive of each other regardless of their times, and they helped motivate each other to give consistent effort towards achieving their personal goals. So that note just speaks volumes about this program and the staff, and of course, our York students. And great job, girls and coaches, on all of your accomplishments and success this year. I know it was not an easy year, and you guys did a fantastic job of staying motivated and doing your best. So congratulations. I am going to read the proclamation now, which highlights all of your accomplishments in detail. Okay. Whereas during the 2020 fall athletic season, the York girls varsity cross country team went undefeated, West Suburban Conference Silver Division champions, 3A IHSA Proviso West Regional champions, 3A IHSA Lyons Township sectional champions, and on Saturday, November 7th, 2020, at Three Sisters Park in Chillicothe, Illinois, the top 7 runners from the York girls varsity cross country team competed as a club varsity team, winning the 2020 cross country championships hosted by Shazam Racing. Whereas, while there was not an official 2020 IHSA state cross country meet this season, head coach Lauren DeAngelis said, This season was like the rolling hills on a cross-country course, a season filled with many ups and downs and unexpected turns due to COVID and revamped racing tactics. Through this team's grit, perseverance, and team camaraderie, the team rose above these challenges together. And these accomplishments bring pride and prestige to York Community High School, District 205, and all of these students' families and the community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education and the administration of Elmhurst Community Unit District 205 express deep appreciation and congratulations to Brooke Berger, Michaela Quinn, Bria Bennis, Caitlin Winton, Catherine Klimek, Maggie Owens, Erin Powers, Bella Swanson, and coaches Lauren DeAngelis, Jimmy Kolb, and Ashley Tucker. Congratulations, all of you, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. You guys did a fantastic job. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. You know, it's been quite a year, and just your perseverance to keep going was amazing. And the coaches, the logistics to manage. I had a cross-country runner this year, and the logistics that you had to do to make it all work, it was quite a feat. And it was a gift to all the kids that were able to participate because they needed something to pull them together. So thank you. And just thank you. Have a great year. And we're so proud to have a girls team win.
And keep running.
Keep running.
Even in the cold.
All right. Okay. So okay.
Thank you.
Now they'll all leave us.
Thank
The best part of the meeting is over.
I know. So nice to have them.
you.
Thanks, girls.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. You're welcome. Congrats.
Okay. That was, again, the best part. All right. Next is we have the public hearing adoption of the 2020 levy certificate. So I declare that move that the Board of Education declare the 2020 levy hearing open. And with that, I will ask Mr. Welton, I believe, to give an overview of the 2020 levy.
All right. For the second best part of the board meeting, the tax levy presentation. So this is the 2020 tax levy, which the property taxes are to be paid in calendar 2021. This tax levy was based on the CPI that came out in January for the previous calendar year at 2.3%, and the board approved the estimated tax levy on October 27th. We published notice in the newspaper December 4th, and now we are having the public hearing. The board will approve the tax levy tonight. The county comes out with the final EAV and extensions in March of 21, and then the taxes are collected in June and September of 21. And so these property taxes really relate to budget year or fiscal year 22. So this shows our operating revenues for the district are 85.4% property taxes. We have 4.6 other local, 6.5 state, and 3.5 federal. So this is our most important revenue source, and it goes up by CPI plus new construction. So in general, our revenue streams go up by about 3% per year. And as you know, our expenditures are mostly staffing, about 68% salaries and 12% benefits. So in order to keep our expenditures in line with our revenues, we really need to closely monitor staffing. But the property tax being 85% of our revenues are just critical for our operating, for our revenue stream. And CPI is a big factor with the tax cap, in the tax cap formula. And 2.3% is the CPI for this particular levy. And 2.3 is higher than the average over the past 5 years, which is 1.8%. And as I said, it's budget year 21-22 for this levy year. So there's an inverse relationship between EAV and tax rate. When EAVs are going up, the tax rates are going down. That's this left part of the illustration here. And this shows we had EAV going down from 2008 to 2014, where tax rates were going up. But currently, EAVs are going up somewhere. This EAV will probably go up somewhere in 3 to 5%. So we're in the left diagram here where tax rates are decreasing. So this shows that inverse relationship. When the EAVs were going up, the tax rates are going down. But the tax rate increase or decrease does not equal the property tax bill. So as I said, when we're determining this tax levy, CPI is the known factor at 2.3, but we don't know how much new construction we'll be getting, and we don't know what EAV is. We think in this case, we've estimated EAV to go up 3.17%. Might be a little more than that when they actually come in March or April. And we don't know what the new construction will be. The EAV in our district is very much residential, 83.41% residential, 10.48% commercial, 5.99 industrial. But we are primarily residential in our EAV in this district. New construction, since most of our EAV is residential, you see that the residential is the biggest part of the new construction with tear downs and renovations, and that's really where our new construction is focused on. And you look at that left hand column there where it's talking about the residential new construction, and it's 29 million, 34 million, 33, 32, 27 last year. So for estimating new construction, we are estimating 25 million for residential, 8 million for TIF 3. That is the TIF, which is the corner of 83 and St. Charles over there by the Portillo's and Chick-fil-A and Kohl's, and I think that new one is home something. But so in addition to the very rough estimate of 33 million, we also levy for an additional 20 million in new construction EAV, because we really don't know what new construction or how much is really going to come in. So we have to levy a little more. But no matter what the district levies, and the levy is another word for request, the county will only extend property taxes for the increase allowable under the tax levy, or under the tax cap. The levy is just a request. So in this diagram here, the levy is the blue line on top. because we always levy a little more because we never know what new construction is at the time of the levy. The purple line at the bottom, that is the CPI. The middle line, that's where it actually comes in at, and that's what comes in, which is just the amount allowable under the tax cap, that yellow line. So with this levy, without the tax, without the abatement on a $500,000 house with no new construction, only existing property, on average, the District 205 portion of the annual tax bill would increase by 2.5% or $180.52. And so this levy is in the capped funds 4.19% and a grand total of 4.08, including the debt service. But that is just the levy or the request. When we, on the right column there, what we actually think it will come in at is 3.47% for operating and an overall 3.44. That's our estimated with the 33 million estimate of new construction EAV. But this next chart is showing an abatement. So back in March and April, when the pandemic was hitting us, the board members wanted to talk about ways that we could relieve the burden on our taxpayers in such a difficult time for our taxpayers and our community. The board was very concerned about that, and they wanted to find ways to keep property taxes from increasing, to keep them more of a flat and not increase to the taxpayers. So the abatement was a concept that we discussed as a way to not impact the operating revenue stream of 2.3 of the CPI plus the new construction. So we looked at reducing the debt service part of the levy through an abatement process. So this amount, $3,175,896, is equal to the CPI amount of 2.3%, in addition to the increase in the debt service from the last year's tax extension to this year's tax extension. So $3,175,896 is the sum of both the increase in debt service along with the 2.3 CPI. And so with that tax abatement of $3,175,896, on a $500,000 house with no new construction, only existing property, on average, that tax bill would be flat for the district's portion of the tax bill. And so that's what this shows. Now on the right there, we still are levying, we still are doing our levy, but what happens is with the abatement, it reduces the bond and interest portion of the tax rate and tax bill, and the only increase the district would get would be on the new construction. So it reduces it there on the right, and you can see that in our estimate. So what this does is it makes it flat for taxpayers with only existing property. So that concludes the presentation on the tax levy.
Okay, questions or comments?
I just had a quick comment if you all can hear me at this point. Sorry, I had some connectivity issues. You know, just that I think the abatement's a very important thing to pursue, and I'm happy that we're able to work through the committee process and get it to the point to vote on it this evening. So thank you for that.
Jim? Jim?
Yeah, sorry, that took me a minute to figure that out. I just want to say I'm very happy and thank the board that we found a way to return some money to our taxpayers and to ease the burden on our taxpayers on, in a year that is particularly trying for everybody that has kids in the schools. So thanks to the board here.
Yeah, and I would just echo those same comments by my colleagues on the board, not just the board, but Chris and the entire cabinet and all the people that went into making this happen. Me as a board member appreciate it, and me as a tax-paying community member appreciate the effort that went into acknowledging what a difficult year this has been for our community. So really appreciative of everything that went into making this happen.
Kara, just so that everyone knows, so this year what we're doing is there's two items that are kind of that are related here that we'll be approving or voting on, the tax abatement and the levy.
I also just would also like to acknowledge that, to be in the position to do this for the community takes wise management over the years. So there's people before me, some of you are still here, that have made good decisions for community and being disciplined along the way, so that in a situation like this that, we were not expecting, we can help our community. So just thank you for those of you that did that over the years. So if there's no one, I don't think anybody else has a comment from the board. And then, so are there any public comments just regarding the levy hearing? So Courtney, from the written comments, are there any levy public comments?
There are no public comments submitted regarding the levy hearing.
Okay. RJ? No?
I believe the people registered for the board meeting, not the levy. So I think their public comments are going to come in the next part.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, so at this time then I will declare the public levy hearing is declared closed, and we will move back into the regular meeting. The next item on the agenda is public comments. There will be 30 minutes allocated for public comments, with up to 3 minutes per public comment speaker concerning items on this agenda, as well as communication, petitions, reports from citizens or representatives of other public agencies. So RJ is going to, I guess, however you're going to let someone in virtually, and if they could just say their name, and then have about 3 minutes, and we'll, I believe Mrs. Troutman is keeping time, and she'll just say 3 minutes is up, and we ask that the speaker, okay, all right, go ahead.
Okay. All right, here we go. Let me just read this first part. During the public comments portion of tonight's meeting, registered attendees will have up to 3 minutes to share public comments. Attendees will be prompted when to speak and will be asked to state their full name. Only audio will be available, not video. Attendees will be muted after their public comment or 3 minutes, whichever comes first. Board members will not respond to public comments during the meeting. All right, we are going to go to public comments. The first person up, we're going to ask you to state your name as you begin here. All right, so here we go. Hello, I believe this is Mr. Grebs. You are live with the Elmhurst School Board. Please start your comments by stating your name. You'll have 3 minutes.
Tim Grebs, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me.
We got you.
We can hear you.
Awesome, thank you. So good evening, everyone. First, I would like to extend my sincerest thanks to the District 205 team for the countless hours spent trying to organize and execute our K through 12 education throughout our community. It's people like Ashley Barra, Judy Harity, Michael Caston, Linda Calvo, Lindsay Rowe, Emily Cohen, Jessica Walker, and countless others who have seamlessly adapted and do their utmost to ensure our kids are afforded the very best education available during these trying times. My comments this evening center upon our growing urgency to get our children back into the classroom. Although I have some specific concerns regarding the Open 205 plan for the middle schools, I can understand that there is no perfect solution. It is much more important for us to compromise now in order to ensure both the near-term and long-term development of our children. I worry more about the adverse mental health effects of the abrupt seclusion caused by the pandemic. I worry that our children are developing a false expectation and will struggle understanding our current situation is temporary and should not be accepted as normalcy. In-person learning in our schools help battle the side effects of our new remote world. I hope that you would agree with this assertion. I will end by saying this. Please know that you have the entire community that is willing to be your teammate in finding solutions to complex problems. Invite us more into your huddle. Be transparent and share the details of your decisions. And don't be hesitant to issue a call for help to our community. We want to be a part of the solutions and can offer impactful resolve in transforming those solutions from paper to reality. Our children are worth every ounce of we can give. Be confident in your plan, be consistent in its execution, enlist the support of your teammates, this guy being one of them, and don't be afraid to take reasonable risks. Thank you for your time, and I wish each and every one of you a Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go on to our next public comment. I'm not sure who it is that joined us, but they did register, so I'm going to unmute them at this point. Hopefully they're still there with us. Hello, you are now live with the Elmer School Board. Please start your comments by stating your name and you'll have 3 minutes.
RJ, maybe read his number off. He or she may not know that they're there.
It's a 317 area code. Last 3 numbers are 833.
My bad. I'm sure this Tim Grabs. You don't want to hear from me again. So thanks. I appreciate the time.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right. And those are our participants for public comments tonight.
Okay, thank you, RJ, for setting that up and putting that in motion. Mrs. Troutman, are there any written comments?
As of the start of the public meeting, there were 21 written comments that have been submitted to the board. Please know that the board members will review, all of the board members will review these written public comments, and these comments will be posted on the district website. In addition, these comments are also included in the minutes for this meeting.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me okay? Is it okay? Yeah, great. Okay. All right. So next we are going to move on to approval of board meeting minutes. Item A is approval of regularly scheduled or regular board meetings from 11/17/20. Did anyone have any changes to those? Okay, then hearing nothing, those minutes stand as presented. Item B, approval of closed session minutes from 11/17/20. Those minutes stand as presented. All right, next up is reports and presentations. We have 3 of those. The first one is the final bond pricing report. And I'll turn it over, I'm guessing, to either Chris Welton or Elizabeth or Dave, someone.
All right, Elizabeth, are you ready? Take
Hey,
over.
everybody. Thanks for having me. So I'm going to share the final pricing report for the second tranche of the district's bonds. The board approved the parameters resolution in September, and we ended up going to market on November 16th. So sorry, I'm just going to get this organized in a way. Hopefully you can see it. And there, can everybody see it? Thank you. All right, so, you know, we really were patient and appreciate the district and the board's patience as well in bringing this issue to market. We had a situation where there was tons of bond issuance in the month of October when we originally had hoped to go to the market once we received our bond rating. But because of all the supply, interest rates increased. So since the point of going to market for this 40 million piece early was to try to take advantage of these great interest rates, we waited. So here's a graphic of where interest rates were at the time of the referendum, November 6th of 2018, where interest rates came down to when the first issuance of the bonds were sold, July 23rd, 2019. And then you can see where the interest rates were on November 16th. There was a lot of uncertainty what interest rate market was going to be post-election. And luckily, interest rates have come down about 15 basis points when we got into the market on November 16th, as opposed to going up post-election. On top of that, much of the bond issuance supply was gone because there was so much in October. So we really had the attention of investors. And with the district's strong AA rating, that was really positive. So you can see the ups and downs of the market here in 2020, kind of like our year. So we weren't at the very, very low point, which happened the first week of August, but we were in good shape with regard to that. This slide shows the all-in true interest cost ended up being 2.52%, which was actually about 3 basis points lower than our September 3rd estimate when we started to present to the Finance Committee about getting into the market with the issue. And over the life of the bonds, that totals about $260,000. So it makes a difference. These are our comparative pricing analysis. And, you know, there's a ton of numbers on here. We did go through these in detail with the board president and the chairman of the Finance Committee, as well as the administration. But what this chart is trying to show you is how the interest rates on your bonds compare with similarly rated bonds that are issued within the same time frame. So for example, we looked at Harper Community College 512. They sold bonds on October 14th, and our bonds mature in 2035 through 2038. And they're a AAA rated district. So I think the theme of a lot of these comparables are, the theme is that with a AA plus rating, which is very strong, our bonds priced as well, if not better in some cases, than other AAA rated bonds in the market at the same time. And because of our timing, our yields were lower. So we look at Harper College, we looked at Northbrook School District 30. We also looked at Oakton Community College and Hinsdale Township High School 86, which sold in early October when we decided not to go to the market. So I think waiting definitely was worth it. Some more comparables, Schaumburg, which is a AAA, and then Galesburg School District 205, which is a AA minus. So what does this mean to the district? Here's the financing plan with this issue. There are two more issues left to get you to the full $168,500,000 approved by the voters. We see the principal and interest on the 60 million, the principal and interest on the 40 million at 2.52%. We have estimates for the issuance of 15 million plus the refunding, which will occur in April of 2021. So the cushion there is 100 basis points, and then for the 2023 is 150 basis points. So we expect those issuances to be lower in interest rate, given the fact that the Federal Reserve wants to keep interest rates really low, around 0 for the next year or so. 2023 is a question mark, so that's why we are conservative. But, you know, I think what we're going to see here is that the total debt service and the impact on the taxpayer is much less than originally proposed. So here's the graphic of the 168 million. Here's the comparison of the promise going back to November of 18 on the average payment on the current referendum bonds versus the new bonds, and the difference with the new EAV, the promise amount, the referendum campaign was $150 for the $500,000 home. With the increase in EAV, it becomes $131 on the $500,000 home. So after, this is our estimate, after 100 million of the 168.5 million of bonds sold, we're looking at something closer to $34 on the $500,000 home. And that does not include the abatement that the board approved along with your tax, or I think you're approving it tonight with your tax levy. So that is going to make the impact on the new bonds pretty negligible versus what the district was already paying on its old bonds. So these are the purchasers. We had a very great sale with demand for more bonds than we could sell. So with that, I will take any questions you have on the sale and the results.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Does anybody have questions? Comments?
I just had a quick comment, and I mean, I think it's great execution, and you know, that last chart that you walked through there with regards to the tax increase that was planned to fund the referendum at its original point versus where we stand today. That's a significant decline in the cost that folks voted on at the time, and we've been able to execute on that despite quite complex times on a variety of issues. So I think that's something that we should all be proud of in terms of delivering for our taxpayers over these past couple of years.
Jim?
Yeah, I just wanted to repeat for emphasis a few things that Elizabeth said. You know, one thing we didn't need to borrow this money until the spring of 2021. And, you know, we knew because of everything going on in the financial markets and the COVID crisis that interest rates were artificially low right now. So in October, when we came to market and we found all these competing deals in the market, and we didn't like the interest rate we would have to pay to get our deal to clear the market, we had the luxury of just pulling our deal out of the market. And then I just wanted to thank Elizabeth and Raymond James, who really stuck with us. We asked them to monitor the market and let us know when they saw an opportunity. And that took about a month. And they called Chris Welton early on a Monday morning and said, we're pretty sure we can get your deal done today. And by mid-afternoon, they had it done. They had it oversubscribed to 7 of the largest institutional money managers in the country. And they saved us three basis points. And Elizabeth's already pointed this out, but I think most people say, well, what's so exciting about 0.03 Well, on $40 million over 20 years, that means a savings of over $250,000 to our taxpayers. So Elizabeth, thank you so much. You did a great job. And frankly, I don't say that too often. And the other thing that as Chris said, particularly proud of we promised our taxpayers a $150 increase on a $500,000 home if they voted yes in the referendum. And through our judicious timing of issuing debt, so far we've got that down to $34. Our abatement of $511,000 of debt payment this year will bring that down further. And if we can abate a few more years, we'll have that number down to 0 and possibly below 0. So, I think that is great news for our community. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jim.
And I'd like to take a second and just jump on that thank you, Elizabeth bandwagon, because, Beth and I were part of that referendum team that were out there meeting with everybody face to face, putting forward the work that the previous board did to get this referendum passed, telling taxpayers that this is all that was going to it was going to mean $150 for a $500,000 home. Those numbers were repeated by us over and over again. And to see this come to the point where it's now $34 from what we promised, really, there's so much negative in our society and community and world today. To see this as such a gift to our community, I'm so proud of it. I'm proud of, our board, and I'm proud of the district, and I'm proud of all the steps that the cabinet and Elizabeth, the brilliant decisions they made. This is a huge thing. And I just wanted to say thank you. I know I'm a dork. It's okay. You can laugh at me, Elizabeth. I see you laughing at me. It's okay.
All right, awesome. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. Have a good holiday. I'm sure you're going to sign off before we're done.
Thank you. Thanks for all your kind comments, and happy holidays to you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item is under reports and presentations is our facilities update from Todd Schmidt. And so whenever you want to take it, it's all you, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you much. What we're going to do is kind of give you a little update of where we're at with the facilities, with the projects that are in process right now, where we're looking at for summer capital projects, and what we're starting to do with referendum projects for 2022. Right now, as we look at it, this is a list of the summer capital projects that we're looking for 2021. Totals almost $6 million. We're looking at replacing some of the gyms, south gym area replacement at York. We're looking at the boiler replacement at York and the pool. This is in conjunction with some referendum work that we're doing in there for the air handling units. We feel that it was advantageous. This work was on our life cycle plan, and we feel it was advantageous to do it now. At the same time, we had a contractor going to be in there, HVAC contractor, working on the pool HVAC air handling unit system. Along with the York pool locker rooms, these units are in the same mechanical equipment room as the air handler units for the pools. So we're looking at replacing those. York field turf for stormwater detention area. That's the area in front of York, in conjunction with the city when they're doing their about 8 acre-feet of underground detention out there. And then we would go in and put our field turf above that. Emerson Clock intercom upgrade. Part of this is we learned this from some of the last year's summer projects. When we put the new additions on the buildings and renovating the office, we're putting in a new intercom and PA system. And what we tried to do last year was tie in the legacy equipment in the rest of the building to the new one, and we had some problems with that. So as we're looking at it moving forward, we're going to go in there, and when we do the Emerson renovations in referendum, we're going to do the whole building with the interclock upgrades. It brings in the annunciations for security drills, fire alarm systems. Then obviously we have the Bryan gravel lot. We have that budgeted out there. That's still sitting out there that we need to look at doing. And the rest of these projects are just some of the ones that we've been doing every single year: the seal coating, concrete replacement, exterior door replacement. With those, in the spring, we'll go out there and do an assessment of all our sites, and we'll look at which ones need to be seal coated, which sidewalks, entry paths, stoops are deteriorating. We'll replace them. Along with the exterior doors, we'll go through, make sure everything's working. If they're rusted out, the hinges aren't working, locks aren't working for security, we'll replace those. We have to do some admin elevator upgrades. Our flooring replacement is everything that's not included in the referendum. We're doing a lot of the flooring replacement out at York. Classroom flooring at Jackson this last summer, so we can look at not in the referendum classroom flooring, either tile or carpet really wasn't included. So what we're doing is supplementing that and going outside of, and we're looking at painting, lunch table replacements. We have problems with our lunch tables. Looking at replacing gym floor at Hawthorne and refinishing and sanding some of the gym floors at Sandburg, Jefferson, and then Bryan gym floors. So that total for this summer comes up to about $6 million. This is kind of let you know what we're talking about when we're talking about York with the stormwater detention. That area in front of the building, that whole area will be stormwater detention, and then we're looking at field turfing out there. And the field turf is going to be full regulation lacrosse and soccer. So we'll give them, right now that area is kind of depressed a little bit, about 2 to 3 foot, so it's really in a flood. So they can use it, they don't get to use it all the time. So now with this new field turf out there, they'll be able to use this every single day of the year. So it's going to be a great enhancement there to York. And just kind of give you York is a big building. So these areas highlighted in yellow is the areas that we're looking at replacing in the roof. Outside of the referendum, we do have a few leaks in these areas. What we're looking at is doing that highlight yellow area, that area number 10, that will be the field house. We'll look at doing that next. In our referendum projects, we're working on the new Lincoln School. Just to give you a little bit, you've probably seen some of these, what it looks like. Great layout of the building, 2-story building, 77,000 square feet. We're doing a beautiful media center inside of there. Just kind of give you some layouts of what we're looking to build. And up here in June. Emerson renovation is another referendum project that we're going to be doing this summer. This is kind of the existing media center that they have out there. And they have in Emerson, if you've ever been in that media center, they have like a little depressed area in the library. It goes down about 2 or 3 steps, which is really unusable space. What we're looking at doing is filling that in and really opening this up and making it a beautiful media center along with the STEM area. Some of the elevations of that area there. What it's going to look like. Also coming up in the summer is when we're going to start working on the interior of Edison. We're working on that addition right now. It's coming along nicely. They should have it ready to go in about 3 to 4 months. On the interior of the space, this is where we'll be taking some existing classrooms, blowing out walls, putting some support structure in there, and making a very wonderful media center as you start stepping into that building. It's going to be a great little media center. At York High School, what we're looking at is in the referendum track resurfacing replacement, which is on the agenda tonight for approval. And then we're looking at the full air handling unit replacement out there as part of the referendum. We're also starting tomorrow, we're doing kickoff meetings for referendum projects for 2022. One of them, obviously, is a field new school. There's no renderings of this because we have changed it a little bit. Maybe you kind of got a brief glimpse at it, but we're refining that now that we've got Lincoln out the bid and we have those bids in. And we're working on those. They're going to start really designing field elementary school, start construction in 2022. At Jackson, we're looking at 3 buildings. We're going to be doing a lot of renovation in Jackson, Jefferson, Fisher for 2022. This just kind of lists some of the things that we're looking at doing as part of the referendum inside of these buildings. And we do tomorrow have kickoff meetings with White and myself and each one of these principals to start looking at the programming of the building to start designing that now. Preparation for 2000. This is all the work that we're looking at here at Jefferson, which is quite a bit of work. Then also this is the work that we're looking at doing at Fisher in the summer. And also one other thing that we're looking at doing is the auditorium renovation. We've got about $7 million in the referendum for that renovation work out the auditorium. We'll probably have those kickoff meetings with the high school in January and start prepping for that. That is my facilities update.
Thank you, Todd. Before I just have a quick question that I'm going to ask first. Chris or Todd, what is our normal, like this year, there's a couple expenditures in there that are not part of our normal spend, so to speak. What is our normal, can you remind what the normal budgeted amount is for our yearly maintenance?
It used to be 1.5 a few years back. And now recently we've increased it, and I think we budgeted for a $4 million transfer to cover the summer 21 projects. So originally we were talking about 4 million. When Todd put this list together, it ended up being closer to 6 million.
So does a 4 million reflect you kind of gave us the 10-year plan? I think it was, I don't know if it was last year or the year before. A time is, I don't know when that was,
Yes.
but you did
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks. This is great. So that was my only question. Anybody else? Chris?
Yeah, I was hoping that you touched on the referendum projects, and I just was hoping you could update us on, reaffirming where we're at in terms of being on time with the projects, how we're tracking relative to budget on what we've put in the ground thus far.
The biggest one right now, we're finishing up the projects that we did over last summer and still working on right now. We're tracking on budget for them with the security vestibule and additions and renovations along with Brian, and Edison is tracking right online. We did with Emerson, we have the bids tonight. That is tracking just a little bit below what we anticipated for budget. We still have one bid out there that we won't get till January for the abatement. That's about $400,000, $395,000 we have budgeted. So right now, if that comes in online, Emerson project for 3.6 million is tracking exactly where we want it to be, just slightly below budget. We did open up the bids for Lincoln. There's a lot of work on that. Terry and his crew with the ICI, we have 175 bids on Lincoln, different trades. It took us 2 hours. Terry was sitting there reading everything, the bids opening. Look under budget, how much, it's too early to tell because we have to, ICI has to verify all those low bidders and then actually there's a lot of work on school. So we do think we will be under budget. That was a $32.5 million budget. And where all the indicators are right now, based on the bids that we've received, feel that we'll be under budget on that project. Obviously, start digging in the ground. It's a very short, compact timeline to get that, start construction in June of 21 and have it ready for August of 22. But we feel pretty confident we'll be under budget. We're tracking really well. There are some that are over budget right now. Obviously, the one that's going in front of the board tonight with the track renovation, that is over budget from what we initially anticipated with those numbers pre-referendum. Have another one that we're in design right now for the air handling units, and because of air exchange rates and things, we might have to upsize those. So we think that might be a little bit over than what we anticipated. But outside of that, the other projects are coming right in line where they would be.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I appreciate the update. I mean, on balance, we're tracking well from a budget perspective thus far. So, I know the process that you and team have in place for executing these projects seems to be working well. And so just keep up the good work on that. And I think, combined with the abatement that was discussed at the beginning of the meeting, and then the financing update for the referendum fundings that we just discussed a few minutes ago, I think it's clear that we're off to a very good start, and hopefully we can just finish it off with regards to the referendums that our voters approved a while back. So good job on that. And then I just wanted to zero in on two specific capital items here: the roof replacement and the Bryan lot. So the roof replacement, I presume that was not part of the original 4 million plan for the year, and that's something that just came up and is fairly non-discretionary in nature.
Well, part of it was, as we looked at the areas, we were going to do a little bit more of the roof replacement as the life cycle looked at it, and we added a couple more areas. So it was about $1 million. We initially wanted to do the field house too, but we backed that down. We were just looking at, these were some of the areas, some of those areas that were problematic for us, and it was better off to do that whole area, so that increases. Also, the stormwater detention initially wasn't in there until the city came up and said about a month ago or so that they're ready to move forward with that project.
Yep. Okay.
The other thing was, in summer of 2020, we had originally planned on doing the Bryan gravel lot. And so when we were budgeting the summer of 2020 with the gravel lot, it was like near the 4 million mark. And we ended up doing 2.6 million because we didn't do the Bryan gravel lot in summer of 2020 when we were originally doing it. So that also resulted in why this one is more than 4 million is partly because we had planned on this Bryan gravel lot a year ago summer.
Yeah, understood. And I think as a general matter, our district has a decent amount of deferred maintenance, and I'm fine, catching up on that. So as a use of our capital. So, I do wish we could have a different solution for the Bryan lot, frankly, that was maybe less of an eyesore for the community as a whole. But, I know we have contractual obligations there. So in the absence of that solution, I'm fine supporting this. So thank you for the work, Todd and Chris. It's great work by both of your teams.
Okay, Beth?
Todd, I just wanted to say thank you for keeping us moving through all of these projects and these important maintenance items during this year that I know has just thrown so many challenges out there with shipping and getting people on the job and keeping everybody safe. So just a huge thank you. The projects that have been completed, the York Turf, and the projects that are in process, Emerson and Edison and some of the other areas just look fantastic. So thanks for all your hard work really much appreciated.
Courtney?
Yeah, I'm just gonna, again, jump on that. I know that there's a lot of focus on a lot of other things right now, but I think this presentation gives a great overview to how much is going on behind the scenes that nobody hears about and that is unrecognized and should be applauded, because these are the things that the community sees and will directly impact every single one of our students' experiences in 205. So thank you so much. And I remember when you were first hired, Todd, the first thing I ever heard you say in a board meeting was a life cycle plan. And I'm like, what is this guy talking about? And now a couple of years later, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I have just such appreciation for implementing that plan and the steps that it will take long-term to keep us in such a better position. So again, thank you guys so much for just kind of sticking to that plan. And I think what Welton just pointed out about how we might be over on this year's kind of summer maintenance projects because the Bryan lot puts us over. We were under last year because we took that off the schedule last year. So when we look at that number of being over, I can't remember the numbers right now, but when we look at being over, I'm going to cycle back, $1.2 million, that Bryan lot is cycling back in. So I just want the community to understand that was supposed to be there last year and it wasn't. So it's just kind of bumped to this year. I just had 2 quick follow-up questions, which I'm either sure I missed or I cut out. When you talked about the roof at York, the replacement of the roof projects, that number 10 area, which is the field house. As a airborne coach, I have been in those areas during the winter months in the gym that will be replaced in the field house many a times, and have seen that the need for replacement. What's the timing when you say it's on the next schedule, that field house area? What's the timing on getting that portion of the roof replaced?
That will be on summer 2022. That's that section of the roof and a couple other sections at some other buildings as we put out our life cycle plan. A lot of these roofs, I can't do them all at once because they were all installed at once. So we're trying to spread them out a little bit instead of trying to do the whole thing. So that field house will be done. It's about $800,000 to $900,000 project that will be summer 2022 capital.
Okay, great. And then the other question I had is the York Auditorium. What is the timeline on that? Where does that fall in the timeline with stuff?
That will be also started in the summer of 2022. That's we're going to start with the program meetings to look at exactly what the building wants. Some of the things were, open up the balcony, stage lighting, rigging, sound, acoustics, scene shop, black box, all that is part of that. So we're going to start designing that in February and send it out to bid. And we'll start as soon as the building will give us the auditorium, hopefully in May of 2020.
Great. And I would just thank you. And I would just encourage, as always, is that you take those, and I know Shahi has done a great job incorporating your community feedback into those plans, but those groups that are directly impacted by those decisions, like theater and all the other clubs and, experiences that happen in that theater, I just encourage those people to be able to supply their input to make sure that we are making the right choices right now when we're doing this awesome thing to make that auditorium everything that York should be. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Just to follow up on that, we reached out to the building through the administration, and they gave us a list of like 5 or 6 names of individuals of each of those different departments who interacts in that. And they're going to be part of that initial program.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Yep.
I actually have three comments. First of all, as far as transferring money out of our substantial reserves to put into capital investment into our buildings, I think that is a very good use of resources. We do have a lot of deferred maintenance. And I think it's a wise investment for our taxpayers to make sure that our buildings are as up to date and well maintained as they can be. Also, regarding the turf field in the Circle Drive at York High School, yeah, I want to thank the board for holding out with the city. The city's original several proposals was that would be a sub-grade field. And, as Todd points out right now, it is a water retention field. It's only 2 or 3 feet below grade level. But it's constantly used and it seems like it's constantly wet. The idea of having that stormwater underground with a turf field on it, I think is a great investment by both the city and the school district for our community, because it'll be used not only by your kids, but if you drive through there on a weekend, you'll see little league teams, community soccer teams, all practicing on that field. And I think that will turn into a great community resource. And then my final comment is about that Bryan gravel lot. To spend 1.6 million on that, I think is a very foolish investment. It is an eyesore. It will remain an eyesore. And there has got to be a better solution. I know the city has reached out to us over the years, proposing that we join them and the Park District in their beautiful maintenance facility on Riverside Drive. I think we need to have exhausted every opportunity of talking with the city about other arrangements and teaming with the city to maintain our vehicles over on Riverside Drive or another area. But to put that lot, that eyesore, on one of the busiest streets in town is a mistake that I think we and the community will regret for decades. It was meant to be a temporary solution to a noise and exhaust problem as we let trucks idle in the back of Bryan School. And I think there are plenty of better solutions for our community than spending $1.6 million to pave a permanent lot that all of our residents will have to look at for decades. When you're on a school board, you get very few opportunities to leave your community a better looking place. Every 100 years or so, you get to replace a school. And I just think this merits all of our efforts to come up with a better solution than spending that money to pave that lot.
Chris?
Well, I mean, I kind of alluded to it in my comments, but I would like, if there is a better solution, let's find it. It would be hard to part with that much money for that purpose. I want to acknowledge that we have obligations that we entered into with regards to what we do on that lot. So I understand that and we need to abide by that. But I do hope that there is a better long-term solution to relocate those facilities, that we can find an agreement with the city on that.
Todd, Todd Schmidt, when do we have to, when will this be going out to bid? So when do we need to have made a final decision?
Well, we can send it out to bid, and we don't, we'd like to send it out to bid and get those numbers finalized so we know exactly what we're talking about. Some of that money in that 1.6 million we've already expended, testing, engineering, design fees, and things like that to get the solid construction. We don't have to, we can send it out to bid, and we don't we can postpone the award date on it. But part of the IGA with the city is to have that completed pretty much by the end of the summer. So we do have some timeline. We have some time constraints on that. I mean, what other options are we looking at if we're going to partner with the city, look at another property or something like that? But this gravel lot, I get constant calls from the city about it. Pretty much have everything taken out of there except for 2 construction roll-off dumpsters that are on cement pads. All our vehicles parked in the front of Brian's lot, in the back of Brian's building. Move some other stuff out to other facilities. Sandberg, I put Conex boxes. I have my stuff scattered all over the place right now because we emptied everything. So we'd like to send it out to bid now. Look at the bid, see where we're at, and bring it to the board. If it's right at, this 1.6 or what the construction costs, or if it's going to be a little bit less, at least get those solid numbers in front of us so we know what we're talking about. That 1.6 is estimate on square footage. ICI did, they do a great job at estimating. Never know, we might get it lower than that. So if the bids come in a lot lower than that, is that more palatable for the school district, or do they you guys still just want to move it somewhere? I'm at a fork in the road right now.
Well, and so having those numbers after a bid, like, solidify the choices we have to make. I guess that's the decision tonight is to just get the bid. It's not to spend that money. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct. Let me proceed to send it out to bid, but it's not approving any bids right now.
So Todd, you're saying that it's a little less than 1.6?
Well, 1.6 is everything all in.
On that whole place? I mean,
What's that? I'm sorry. You cut out.
Yeah, I know it. I'm having internet issues tonight. Sorry. So are you saying that a little less than 1.6 is what is budgeted or projected to lay asphalt on that whole section?
What I say is this 1.6 million is everything all in. That's for our surveying, our soil boring, our design. We've already completed the design with White, so we've already expended that. We've already done the testing, soil boring. So we already have about $150,000 of that 1.6 already expended to get to this point right now, creating the bid documents, things like that. And it's not just paving, it's demoing that whole site out there, doing stormwater underneath it, putting some concrete, some asphalt, redoing. It's not just the gravel lot. If you look there by Brian where the bus lanes are, outside of the fence, redoing all that curb and gutter around there too, redoing the landscaping, putting berms all the way around that gravel lot, doing a lot of landscaping around the whole thing, and 8-foot high wooden fence around the whole thing too. So it's not just in asphalting inside the gravel lot. There's things on the exterior of that gravel lot that we're gonna upgrade to.
Can you hear that?
No.
So do we have to do stormwater because we're paving it?
Yes.
Now,
Since it's gravel right now, since we're putting a solid surface on there, we have to do some stormwater detention, which would be an underground vault.
so that's what's driving up the cost.
That's about $300,000.
I believe the underwater vault is what drives up the cost, in addition to the paving.
I'm sorry, Todd, did you say 300,000?
About that, yeah. You're looking at budgetary wise, as we look at for 1 acre feet of underground detention, you're looking at right about $400,000. Almost 0.8. There is like 0.7.
the other thing that Todd had investigated is the city does not have a current place for our use at this point in time. There's, at some point, there may be something, but it's an indefinite point in time. And when that happens, we would have to lease it. So it's all like, there's not like the city is saying you have a place in our garage. There's no, they don't have anything current for us to use. Isn't that right, Todd?
That is correct.
Okay, so
If
it's
they
just,
don't have anything, it's just a concept. So if they don't have any place, then that should allow us to delay the finishing, if that's kind of what is one of the options, right?
We're required by September 1st to have the gravel lot up to code. Based on our IGA with them for the overarching agreement with the TIF, with the York Stormwater, et cetera. And the Bryan lot is part of that, and it needs to be completed by September 1st. There's been no offer from the city that is more financially appealing or more operationally appealing to the district that that is worth exploring at this point. So we don't really have any better options that have come forward to us from the city to try to take a look at some type of a joint agreement for a shared facility. So we have to meet the timeline on our agreement, and we essentially have no other options that are viable. So it is a catch-22, as Todd alluded to, and I really don't know how else to try to explain that. I think we've tried to explain that before. So we understand the cost associated with that project is not appealing to anybody. We just don't have any better alternative options.
So for it to be up to code, does that mean that it has to be a gravel lot? Because the gravel lot then says you have to do water retention.
It has to be paved in order for us to be able to park our trucks there, because that's part of the city code. They've not enforced that with us in the past, but that is their expectation now. And so we are temporarily parking our trucks in a different place until we have that lot up to code and we can move them back.
yeah, I mean, and just to, I'm not interested in, I don't want to violate the intergovernmental agreement. That was a lot of work on all sides to put that in place. So I'm not advocating for that. I think maybe just one last check-in between the senior counterparties there to make sure, hey, we're spending this money, it's permanent. So, it's all of our town, right? So it's one of the first things you see when you're driving down Hearst from that direction. And is that what we want? Because we're making it permanent. And if not, and that's agreed upon that folks don't want that, then we can work from there. But, in the absence of that, we'll do what we have to do under the IGA, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I agree with.
I'm sorry, Jim, but to Chris's point, I agree, it's a lot of money to spend on a gravel lot, but with the time constraints that are involved here and with no other options available, we are stuck in this corner where we're being forced to make this decision now. And, I do feel like it's a catch-22. Like has been said here, nobody wants to spend $1.6 million on a gravel lot to beautify a space that we can use. But we don't have alternatives right now that keep us in line on the timeline of the IGA.
Also,
Can you send us the design again?
Yes, I can do that.
Thanks.
May I make a comment? The deadline that we have was imposed by the city. The city has expressed to us over the years multiple times they would like us to join them in their maintenance garage. I would like to ask Kara to call the mayor and have a discussion with the mayor and explain, as Chris said, once we spend 1.6 million, this is our permanent solution. Don't ask us about the maintenance garage again. But if you're serious about the 3 governmental entities trying to gain some efficiency for our taxpayers, then extend that deadline or come up with another place where we can park our trucks where they are out of public view. I think that phone call is worth making.
So I followed up about 3 weeks ago and, asked if there were any other, I went back out to the site, we walked through the public works garage and, if there were any other different thoughts other than us just, like there's that property right there. They have not gotten back to me with any follow-up since then. So I will call them, Jim, and do a follow-up and say we have to move forward. I did say that in December, this would be on the agenda for discussion and that we would have to vote on it in January, and asked if they had any other options that they wanted to, at that time, once we make the decision, it would be final, obviously, if we put that much money into the Bryan lot. I have not heard anything since. But I will follow up after this meeting because, we've talked about it as a board and make sure that there are no other options presented.
Yeah, for the sake of the community, I just want to make sure that we have exhausted all attempts and all options to relocate our trucks off of that corner.
Yeah, agreed. And Todd, you mentioned before, like I personally would be fine collecting bids, right? At this point, because that's part of the process, right? And helps to sort of refine the decision making and things like that. So I think, while that process is going on of just doing the last check of, is this really what we all want? It seems like we should also be collecting the information on final cost and things like that so we can execute depending on what the answer is.
Yeah, and if we can do whatever we can to keep the costs down, that would be great. But Kara, thanks a lot for always speaking and with the city on our behalf. And I know you've done a lot of work with that, so thanks.
Thanks. And just, Todd, one thing, could you also, and maybe you gave us the cost, but what is the cost if we don't pave it? We still have to probably do a little bit of paving in that bus lane and do landscaping or, grass or something, right? Have you ever given us an estimate for that?
Yes, we did an estimate. It was $400,000 to $500,000 to demo everything out there, redo the curbs, and pretty much pour out some of that recycled material there, do some stormwater, and turn it into.
Okay, so it's about $500,000 to just,
Yes.
we'll say, clean it up, so to speak, and make it just a green space with no paving.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. I couldn't remember. So, okay, I will follow up then on that. But I will go ahead, Todd, I think we're at least in agreement to go ahead and go out to bid for it. And then we'll make the final decision in, I guess it would be January or February.
Probably February as we look at it right now as we're coming up on our holidays. We can send the bid out there, but we're not gonna want to get any of the bids back until probably mid-January. Okay. Take time off.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And anything, I think we're good with that agenda item. Okay. Moving on to our standard agenda item of COVID update. And, we've put this on as a standing agenda item. There's always things change even from the time the agenda is put out to the time that we get to the meeting. And just, as a clarification, I know sometimes, the board, this is the only time we meet. So I know sometimes it feels like our discussions are long, but this is the only time we get to be together to talk about all these issues. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Moyer to run through the updates, and then we'll ask questions or have a discussion.
All right, thank you, RJ. Can you pull it up? All right, you can go to the next one. So this is what we're going to talk about tonight, just to set the stage a little bit. And if you go to the next slide, the first item is review of local metrics. And this is just to remind everybody of what we did at the November meeting, which was to adopt some local metrics so that we could create a little bit more flexibility in our decision-making process. And so we started out with saying that we were still going to take a look at the DuPage County risk levels of substantial, moderate, and the implications for hybrid and remote learning. But then we brought forward a concept where we did a weighted percentage of our District 205 rates based on the community, the affected communities, and how many students actually feed into our district from each community. In addition to that, we had, I believe it's 12 additional considerations that we took into account, and those are listed there, meaning that if we were trending in a good direction, or if our rates were sort of, not significantly above some of our cut levels, and we had some of these other factors to take a look at, that it could also help us be a little bit more precise about, do we just close classrooms or schools if we feel that we have a concern that's a little bit more isolated. And when we talk about this opening proposal for January, the goal is that when we open, we do not have to get to a situation where we have to declare a remote learning situation for all schools, that we are able to actually take a look at things a little bit more surgically, and try to keep education going for as many kids as possible at all times. So if you could go to the next slide, you'll see that the latest release from DuPage County, which includes numbers through December 4th, positivity rate 12.5%, cases per 100,000, 581. Now, because we use the Northwestern dashboard, and that's updated daily when we do our estimated numbers for District 205, we were able to have that be within a day of the current date. Those get updated every day, as I said. And so you can see that the D205 rates at 7.7% and 386, well, still maybe not exactly where we would want to be in terms of our comfort level, are actually trending in the right direction for us, which is good news. And we hope that that will maintain itself over the rest of the holiday season, so that when we do get back to January, we're in a situation where those numbers are continuing to move in a positive direction. The next slide then, please. So we sent out a survey to all of our families and asked them, based on their response in the fall, about their decision of remote versus in-person learning. They had the opportunity to change, if they were remote, to request to go back to in-person. And we shared this with you on Thursday night. I'm just going to let Mary Ann summarize sort of the aggregate data and any potential hotspots briefly. I know we talked about it Thursday, but that was a special board meeting. So if we could just get a real high level overview here, Mary Ann, I'd appreciate that.
So again, we asked all remote families if they were interested in coming back in second semester. 366 of them replied that they would like their students to return in person. So that brings our total across the district of in-person students to about 85%. There is some variation across schools, with some schools as high as 95 or 96%. And some schools lower than that. So just about 24% of the remote families wanted to switch to in-person.
Okay. And then before you go to the next slide, there's just a couple of things that I wanted to point out here. And the first is just the highlights of the plan that is included in the packet for you to vote in just a little bit. And what we are going to be recommending is that we amend the calendar to make January 6th our 5th and final remote learning professional learning day for the year. And our rationale for that is that the additional iPads that we ordered have arrived, and we want to make sure that we do that training early on in the school year here to maximize the benefit of that investment. Also, we're recommending that the 7th and 8th be remote learning days for all students. What this would do with those 3 days after the break is when we return on January 11th and return all students to hybrid learning, what that would give us 10 days after New Year's Day before people return physically to campus. And we think that that would allow, hopefully, for some of the any kind of holiday surge to start to reverse itself before any of our people started congregating in large numbers in our buildings. So the elementary schedule would be the same as it was in the fall, and the high school schedule has been changed a little bit to accommodate some additional minutes of instruction and a few other minor tweaks, but nothing substantial. But the changes are in your packet as well. The biggest changes would be potentially at the middle school level, which Scott will discuss in just a little bit, and that's due to two primary reasons. One is that with the increased number of in-person students, we've maxed out our ability to bring students back to campus and preserve the 6-foot social distancing. The other primary reason is that we have been given medical advice from one of the infectious disease doctors that we consult with from the Metro Infectious Disease Consultants, who has said that we should, during these periods of high transmission, if we're going to bring students back to school under those conditions, that we should not be eating in the buildings. What they're finding is a lot of transmissions in different businesses, organizations, and healthcare industries and other places are due to people eating in shared spaces, lunchrooms, break rooms, et cetera. And so we will provide a snack break for students at all grade levels, or excuse me, at the K-8 grade level, on days when they can go outside. But if we do get inclement weather days, they will not get a snack break on those days. We don't expect that to be very many days, but there could be some times where that happens, and we just wanted to share that with you. So there are a couple of other things here, and I'm looking for some notes that I wanted to address before I move on. So I wanted to let you know that Dr. Dworkin from UIC has been consulting with us on testing, and Dr. Toromino from the DuPage County Medical Group is going to be consulting with us on our contact tracing. And then the Metro Infectious Disease Consortium is another resource for us that we're utilizing. Now, there were a couple of other things that I just wanted to address. People have asked us various questions over time, like, can you get plexiglass barriers? The efficacy of the plexiglass barriers are not going to get us any real significant increased protection. So that is why, actually going all the way back to the fall, we decided not to invest in them, is that we did not feel that was something that was going to be able to provide any extra protection. Some people have done that in other schools, and people continue to point that out to us, but our head nurse and the other people, facilities people, that when Todd has looked into this, and then we've gone on and taken it down the road of really trying to confirm with various experts whether or not these are things that we should invest in, it's continually come back to us that it's just not really going to prevent transmission to any significant degree. So I think that those are some of the big ideas that keep coming up. I think that I have been able to hit most of those. I do want to indicate one thing that does tend to get lost in the shuffle when we start talking about all the different pros and cons of various scenarios. When the community spread is high, we may be able to have a fair degree of success or even a high degree of success in actually preventing transmission at school. But it becomes very, very difficult for us to maintain continuity of education when all of the contact tracing, all of the quarantining that needs to happen. I do realize some of the quarantine guidelines have been relaxed, but in those high rates of community spread, when we have people who have kids that have symptoms, or if they have people that work in the healthcare industry or whatever, it's not just always all about what's happening exactly in our buildings. When you live in a community, people go to the stores, they mingle about. And so it is much more of a challenge on top of something that is already a significant challenge, even when we're in the moderate risk category. So I think that it just needs to be noted that when we go back in January, we will open and we will make decisions locally, and we will maintain the hybrid model. But there are going to be significant staffing challenges, and there could be times that does impact our ability at certain schools or sites to staff our classrooms. And it just needs to be noted. I know it's not a popular thing to say, but it is an actual practical reality every day for our principals and everybody else involved in trying to manage our buildings. So at this point, what I want to do is turn it over to Scott, because Scott is been working for about a month, maybe longer, it's hard to say, almost every day with our 612 principals, going through scenario after scenario after scenario to try to get us to January. And I will let him explain what is behind the recommendations that are coming forward to you tonight as it relates to the middle school schedule.
Thank you, Dr. Moyer. Can everyone hear me okay? So as Dr. Moyer shared, it sounds like we have confidence with the high school schedule for York, and that was shared at the meeting last week. Tonight, I have an update for you regarding the revised middle school schedule. And my goal here informally is to really share as many details as possible to build some understanding and to create some confidence in knowing that we have exhausted every single opportunity and option that we can think of at this time, given the scenario we are in. So what that has involved is an analysis of every single learning space in each of the middle schools with a primary focus on Sandburg and Bryan. As we talked about, we have gone through each section. I'm looking at series of charts related to every single teacher, every single classroom, and looking where to see there are potential overages and where can be alternative meeting locations for those students or potentially for that entire classroom if it deemed necessary. It involves places like the cafeterias, the libraries, maker spaces, auditoriums, art rooms, PLTW rooms, the gymnasiums. We've looked at several creative hallway spaces. We've reviewed some of the fire codes. We've also looked at each section in the schedule to see where there are possibilities and opportunities, whether that means actually pulling students and revising certain schedules. Just for perspective, there are 179 sections of students at Bryan Middle School. Each and every single one of those has been analyzed in detail to the student with a grid that points out what days students are scheduled to attend school. We've tried to move students into different schedules and different days. We've engaged the school leadership teams in the buildings. And by we, I mean the principals, to see if there is any sort of creative or alternative plan that teachers and teacher leaders may have in mind. We have at this point roughly 13 and some additional informal schedule considerations that we've looked at. And that's just for January and March at the middle schools. We have looked extensively at the week 8 survey data and have tried to keep that as our compass in the work for our students and really trying to figure out what the instructional model should look like based on their feedback. We've taken into consideration some of the input from the steering committee on the 9th. And tonight, hopefully you will hear your input from the 10th and the 2 revised options, both of which include additional minutes, but are not free from additional challenges. In short, option 1 involves the core classes being in person with the electives taking place remotely. That would involve also a potential ABC schedule for Bryan Middle School. We're very confident that that is going to be necessary. And option 2, it would be the core and the electives in person with a slightly few more minutes in the schedule as well. That unfortunately looks like it will push Sandburg Middle School into an ABC model as well. RJ, if you could go to the next slide, I have a few more sort of foundational pieces as to how we came about the capacity issues and what we've been using as a gauge to decide where and when we come across a potential issue. So this is not based in our decision-making on gut reaction or a feel in the classrooms, although we have walked the spaces and have done as much creative rearranging as possible. The rooms have been cleared out of excessive furniture and other details. And what we've looked at with the help of some of these renderings is what a classroom occupancy could look like based on its square footage. So when I referred to each of the classrooms being analyzed for their square footage, we have taken every single learning space, placed the square footage of that space in a grid, and looked at the actual current course list for that room to see where we need to move students if at all possible. So those were our guiding points to maintain the spacing, which allows for us to minimize the quarantining as well. That's okay, you can go to the next one, thank you.
Hey, Scott, I just want to elaborate on that for people that might not be 100% sure what you mean by that. When we have to make quarantining decisions, we have to take a look at what is defined as close contacts. And if we have students that are much closer together, if they're closer together than 6 feet, then there's a likelihood that we will end up having to quarantine more people. And in some cases have more shutdowns and more missed school than we otherwise would. So I just wanted to try to just elaborate on that a little bit so that people understood what was behind that comment.
So what we're looking at in the ideal scenario and what we anticipate for Churchville at a minimum is the AA remote BB schedule that we had in the fall. That worked well, and it worked well at each of the middle schools. But when we had the increased capacity due to the attendance numbers coming in higher than we anticipated, we have the overage situation. The second schedule is referred to as a contingency schedule. Those wouldn't necessarily be the days. So if your student is assigned or designated as a C grouping, they may not be necessarily on Wednesday. This is just the mock-up. It is cut off a little bit in this slide. I apologize, but I tried to show a January at a glance model. And if we return to school on the anticipated return date of January 11th across the district, we are anticipating 6 days in person for students in an AB model. So that would be students at York High School, that would be students in kindergarten through 5th grade, students in Churchville, et cetera. If on an ABC model for January, what that number would go down to 5 days in person for the A group, 4 days for the B group, and 4 days for the C group. So that's January at a glance. Obviously, we would be starting the 11th or a holiday in January as well as 2 institute-related days. So it's a shorter month in itself, but I wanted to just use that as a potential gauge to show the difference between the 2 different models on a daily basis. If you go to the next slide, please. So option 1, as mentioned, would involve E-blocks in the afternoon. The E-blocks are the electives. This is a build-in of intervention time in the morning, as well as core blocks of roughly 75 minutes. There's also 5 minutes in passing periods, which was some feedback received in the first semester that the passing periods were short. The students would have 45 minutes roughly to travel for lunch and to get back home. In this model, we anticipate that Brian will need to be on an ABC schedule. In this model, Churchville and Sandburg will be able to function as an AB model. The reason being for that is that the E-block classrooms and those meeting locations during the day are spaces that would be used for the overages. So in areas that are problematic at Sandburg, we would staff and utilize those spaces that typically would have an E-block in them during the day as a way to help with some of the capacity. That's an important component because we lose that in the second option. Obviously, you gain other things in the second option with having in-person learning for the electives, but we lose those spaces, which you'll see here in a minute. If you could go to the next model, please. This is a summary of the minutes in that option and what this would look like. Similar to what was presented last week, but with the new schedules here, we have an increase in minutes from what was presented last week. That first row will maintain what was happened first semester. You'll see that in another grid in a minute. So we had roughly 2,400 minutes per month on a 4-week basis. That's just an approximation. We had 1,450 in terms of instructional minutes in the first semester schedule. Whereas in this version here, you're looking at, you'd have an increase there to 1,725. Some of that would be remote, no doubt, with the electives. And the monthly time in person would be 2,160. That is an increase from what was presented last week based on the feedback we received. If that model was ABC for those folks potentially at Bryan, and that scenario, as you see there for BMS, it's meant to indicate Bryan Middle School. The monthly time in person would be 1,890. So I'm trying to give an articulation there of the difference that the students would be experiencing, as well as the parents, obviously in their schedules on a monthly basis, and that's on a 4-week timeline. If we could go to the second option, and then I think you'll be able to sort of cross compare these two after seeing those. So the second option is more of a, if you could go back, thank you, is more of a reflection of first semester. The start time and the dismissal times are similar to what we had. They're exactly the same as we had first semester at 8:30 and 1:30. The addition here that looks different is there's an intervention and enrichment block. Wednesdays would reflect the schedules you see in front of you. So on a Wednesday, a student would go through these same courses. They would do so remotely in an AB model. So at Churchville, in this model, we would need to be in an ABC scenario for both Bryan and Sandburg. The reason being, again, not having the E-block spaces during the day to put the overages, we do not have enough alternative locations for those students to go to. The other differences to this schedule, the core blocks are at 60 minutes. The E-blocks are at 25, give or take. We have one sort of odd place where it's 28 minutes. Intervention enrichment is 30 minutes. The passing period is 2 minutes in this version. We have 45 minutes in for travel and lunch. There is also a summary of minutes for this as well. If you could go to the next slide, please. In this model, again, you see first semester with that monthly breakdown at 2,400. In the AB model, it's the same because the start and end times are similar in terms of your in-person minutes, as well as the weekly instructional minutes. In this model, if on an ABC structure, you would have a reduction of 300 minutes every 4 weeks, roughly. That's on a typical month that we would have, 4 weeks of instruction. Obviously, January would be excluded from that, calculation, but you're looking at a 300-minute difference per 4 weeks.
So when we get to the motion, it's written in a way that will allow us to move in whichever direction you choose in terms of the option 1 or option 2. The last thing that we wanted to do by way of update is just inform everybody, and you can go to the next slide.
I think that was it in terms of my presentation. I just wanted to.
Yeah, I thought you were done, Scott. I'm sorry. If you're not,
you're good.
Okay, all right. So the last thing is there is a motion in the packet related to testing. It's got the draft contract. It's got the reminder information that we went over a couple months ago about what the surveillance testing is. LaGrange has still had no false positives. We've been exploring LaGrange, New Trier, and Glen Ellen primarily. As we learn from some of these early adopters, LaGrange, I think Nikki could elaborate a little bit on this, but I believe that they've only gone through 2 rounds of testing. So some of this is really new. And because it's really new, people are learning, and even the guidance is changing with some regularity here. The IDPH came out with something about 10 days ago. The DuPage County Health Department put something together on Monday. The State Board of Education is perhaps looking at supporting some testing at a larger scale. There is a possibility of different things down the road with CARES Act extension and other types of tests becoming available. I think that the IDPH is going to release some information very soon, maybe as early as Friday, on vaccines and when we might be to expect those to be available for education. And so there's just so many different moving pieces. But as we started to learn and read the updated guidance and explore what these other schools are doing, there will be some added cost to the district. And because we're a lot larger than some of these other districts, we are in the process of putting together what the plan would have to specifically be in order for us to support the testing. And it would require a relatively significant amount of manpower to pull it off, which we could do. And we're taking a look at how we would have to structure that, how we would have to delegate the supervision, and how many people we would need in different capacities. And we're continuing to look at that. But as of right now, we do not have the survey results back on participation. And we wanted to track those responses through Friday, and are suggesting that we send out a follow-up survey and try to get as many people to respond yes or no as possible so that we can hit that minimum threshold if we are going to move forward with the testing. Because for us, I think at this point to spend, I would have to put, some of my top administrators on this for the next couple days to pull this off, which we could do. But I think that it would be better if we can get the numbers to know what we're looking at with percentages for interest, so that when we give you the more specific information that you need, you'll have a more precise idea of the staffing implications and associated costs in addition to the purchasing of the tests. There are a lot of administrative details that need to go on with the collection and the contact tracing, which we are in the process of hiring contact tracers that you authorized. So, those are some of the things that we know since we met on Thursday, as we've continued to accumulate as much information as possible about implementation here in 205. So I think, Kara, those were a couple of my comments. I don't know if you wanted to say something.
Well, I think probably right now everybody has some questions, but could you clarify right now while we are talking about, or while you just said the testing? Because one question that has come up a lot, and I think it's a little maybe confusing in the survey, is what role does testing play in getting us back or keeping us back, or people want to know if it's going to enable us to have more people back. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think that the thing that'll be most helpful is the vaccine. As far as not only with the governor's executive order, State Department of Health guidelines, our own local metrics and safety concerns, I think that the vaccine is the key. The sooner that we can get that going, the better. The biggest advantage of the surveillance testing, there are two. One is to try to prevent outbreaks and minimize asymptomatic transmission. And when you do that, if the more that are in the testing pool, the better. And you can hopefully prevent having to shut down classrooms or schools if you do catch some of those early. But, surveillance testing is not 100% accurate. It depends on the day you test and you don't catch everything. People have to go back for a follow-up diagnostic test, which means that they still miss some time. But it could have an impact on maintaining the continuity of our current model. It also has an impact on the psychological well-being of the people that are in the buildings, feeling that there's an added layer of safety. But it is not in and of itself a panacea. And while it may help us if the rates get down lower and the testing seems to be working to where we have more precise information about positives in the schools, percent positivity rates in the schools, to where if they're very low, we think we could have a high level of confidence and we might be able to move more quickly. It's really hard to guarantee that that's a definite outcome. What's a more likely scenario is that it will allow us to do what we're proposing with fewer interruptions.
Okay. All right. So I'm sure everybody has questions. And I don't know if it's better to kind of have them on a topic, like schedules first, and then we go through whatever else anybody has. So I'll just open it up. I know there's some questions, I'm sure. So Beth?
So we're going to start with schedules. Is that what you want to do, Kara, for questions?
Yeah, let's start with schedules and then, yeah, we'll start with.
I guess, first of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone that is working on this piece. I know it is like putting a 10,000 piece jigsaw puzzle together, and it is very difficult to find the perfect solution. And I think one thing we know is that in a lot of these situations, there just is no perfect solution. And you guys are trying to find the best possible solution that satisfies the needs of the most students. We have lots of different things that you guys are trying to address here through our surveys and students' needs and teachers knowing what kind of time they need for intervention and such. So I know this is very difficult. I just had a couple of thoughts on the two schedules, and I know that in-person time is very important to our community and to all of us. I do notice that there's a longer day, so a little bit more in-person time per day in the second option. And one thing that just jumps out at me about the option number 2 is that it just
excuse me, RJ, can you go back to those schedules as long as we're on the schedules?
Thank
please?
you. So in this schedule, this one here, RJ, one thing I like about this schedule is that there is an opportunity to have our e-blocks incorporated within the day. And I feel like it gives students a little more balance in their day, where they have the hands-on experience, where maybe they're getting an opportunity to work together. I know they're still apart, but work together and collaborate a little bit more in those e-blocks in our Project Lead the Way classes and industrial tech, and all of them really offer that. So that is something that I like about this schedule. I also like that it has, I mentioned this last time, I know, but just that the day ends at the same time as it did the first semester. So it gives families a little bit of continuity in what they were doing then. So I just wanted to point out those couple of things. And thank you again for all of the time and energy that you are putting into this process. We all appreciate that.
Okay, thanks. All right, somebody else? Karen?
Scott, I know that you went through a lot of the spaces and all, but I guess I just wanted to ask a little bit of clarification. And sorry if it's too much detail, but for example, for Brian, or in option 2 might be Brian and Sandberg, are we storing some of the excess furniture at those buildings that we can move somewhere else so that we can gain some extra space for the kids to be in person more?
We have looked into the furniture piece. It's not a total obtrusive spot at Bryan. It's in the auditorium right now, and some of the aisles there, and on the stage. So it's not scattered, and it hasn't impacted some of the planning. Obviously, we did the planning through the view that we would just remove anything we needed to. So that was not a hindrance in some of the plans that were drawn up.
Darn it. And I guess I still want to have us explore like temporary space or buildings. I guess what I'm leaning towards is I like the option 2 because it's more like first semester, it gives the kids more minutes. But because we have more demand for in-person, the ABC is I know you worked hard to get to that point, but I'm not nuts about it. So I guess the other thing that I'm thinking about is we typically don't have 100% attendance every day, and if the overflow is only 3, 4 students, is it possible for a particular class? Because it's not like we're saying you're not coming in to the school at all for any of the classes, but it's not all the classes that are overflow. It's just some of them, right? So my thought is that for those small number of classes that have the overage, is there some way for students to rotate? I mean, if there's 100% attendance, right? Because if there's not 100% attendance, then the issue is not as pronounced. So is there some option?
Yeah, so our attendance is incredibly strong. It's a good problem to have, unfortunately. In sixth grade, we had attendance rate of 98.86 from September to the end of November, just as a snapshot. Same in seventh, 98.8. Eighth grade was 98.9. So we are literally almost at 100% attendance on a daily basis. We did play around with the idea and the development of a grid that would potentially be the case if we were to move individual students, and it did not get us to where we needed to be to get out of the ABC structure. So in other words, what that involved was basically taking every class over capacity and looking for alternative locations for students. We ran into A, a limited amount of those spaces, and then B, an inability to staff the supervision for those spaces, but it was more so the space than it was the staffing model. Because then we talked about potentially hiring supervisors for that, but it really, we didn't even have the locations to have the supervisors interact with the students who would be going to school and then engaging with their teacher through remote learning in the building while the students in that class were in a separate location. It created a gridlock there, as well as some equity issues, rotation issues, but really we didn't even have the space to get those students into an ulterior location. It started to work in certain spots, and the momentum is there, and then all of a sudden you run out of spaces.
Well, once again, I'll say darn, right? I mean, I had a feeling that you went through these things, but, having me ask the questions,
I think we can't hear you, Karen. Okay.
several years, we had temporary space at all the schools at one point. So maybe we do that. That's where I'm leaning. And Kara, for now, I'm done.
So Scott, if you like, let's just say, with the core blocks and the E blocks, it's difficult because unlike the high school, they're not all running at exactly the same time. So there's overlap. But at any given point in time, just an estimate of how many rooms are affected by being over capacity. Just take Brian as example, because I know you probably dug into that one most deeply.
So at Brian, it's 40 sections. So we have 40 sections of the 179 that have created issues for us.
So does that mean, is that like simultaneously conflicting?
Oftentimes, yes. So for instance, during if we look at the schedule in front of us, during a core block 1, you may have multiple courses during that time that have overages.
So let's say if we ran a utilization, schedule, and I'm just making this up. If there's 40 classes out of whatever, but when you come to room utilization at any given point in time throughout the day, you've got 20 classrooms affected. That's the equivalent of 10 trailers. And then we would have to take a look at not only what it would take cost to do that, but what the extra maintenance and all of those kinds of things would be for what we're hoping to only be a month, maybe, before or I don't know that I want to give a specific period of time, but the idea is that, we are anticipating that it's going to start to get better. So, I'm just using that as an initial example to talk about the feasibility and the practicality of, it's not a couple rooms. In other words, the point I'm trying to make is it's a lot more extensive than that. And that's an accurate statement, correct, Scott?
That is correct.
And again, Dave, thanks for going through all that detail, right? Because it gives people a sense of, what we'd be asking, right? We don't even have exterior space for 20 trailers or 10 trailers for 20 classrooms, right?
Well, I mean,
Where would we put them?
I think you'd be hard. Yeah, it would be tough, I would think.
Yeah. So Dave, when you were talking about, well, it's, just a short period of time, the thought is that we get vaccines, the numbers keep going in the positive direction, meaning reduce positivity, et cetera. So we then at some point are bringing more people into the rooms.
Yeah, well, I think we all
in
agree
person,
that we
that's
want
what
to
you're
get it.
saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree that we want to try to find a way creatively to get as many kids in school as frequently as possible. I just think that I don't think it's a good idea for us to make some type of promise and say that we can guarantee that it's going to be X date and this is for sure what it's going to be, because I don't think any of us can say for sure. But I do think that we all feel that the vaccine gives us a lot of hope that because they have teachers, in 1B right now in their vaccination plan, that we could get the kids back in school in more frequently. Everybody wants them in there every day. I don't want to make promises that we may not be able to support, but I just think that we're getting closer and closer. We are getting closer.
So bottom line, are we saying that, yes, I mean, this is the plan to start January 11th, but as those indicators and those activities begin to take place here in our district, that we will move even within that Q3. We're not waiting till it's done to go into Q4, et cetera.
Well, I think we'll do it as soon as possible.
That's how nimble we will be.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll do it as soon as possible. We'll see the IDPH vaccination information fairly soon. We'll get a glimpse of what the rates are after the holidays. The thing that you have to remember is that every time you change these middle school classrooms and you're changing, support services and IEP minutes and, travel teachers and everything else. I mean, it's not like we can say on Friday, okay, Monday, boom, but that doesn't mean that we aren't going to try to be as responsive and move as quickly as possible.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks. Okay, Courtney?
Thanks, Kara. So and I apologize in advance about how probably long this will seem, but I do want to not be remiss in remembering to applaud all the efforts of Dr. Grenz and his team and the cabinet on trying to reflect the feedback from not only last Thursday, but from the community over last week. I don't know which, I think it was Beth that said that it is really trying to put a puzzle together. And I just want to applaud all the time and effort you are putting into this, because I don't want it to go unrecognized. And I don't want you to think it's not appreciated. And I also want to remind the community that we are taking these steps to bring our kids back into the buildings while DuPage and our numbers are still in the substantial category. And that's something that other districts are not willing to do. And we should be applauded for that. And I think there's a lot of criticism of the district and the board for the decisions we're making. But there's not enough credit given to the efforts that we're trying to make to put kids back in the building. I personally am not comfortable not acknowledging the social guidelines, the distancing guidelines, and the precautions put in place right now. Talk to me in February and I'm sure my opinion will be different. But right now I'm not comfortable with that. But that being said, I am still not overwhelmingly happy about the restrictions being placed on the community, the students coming back into the building under the options that are presented at the middle school level. I know that there are 40 sections out of the 179 at Bryan that are about 3 to 4 students on average over. I don't know that we've heard, and I apologize if I've missed it, the numbers at Sandburg, because it seems to me that the overwhelming majority of our community is in support of option 2, which brings our kids into a most consistent schedule with what they saw in the fall, that 8:30 to 1:30, which I personally am in support of. I think that extended schedule that gives the e-blocks at home and more FaceTime, which I do like. But I do think it's too long of a day to be on a computer for our kids from 8:30 to 3:30. So I am in support of option 2 on the middle school schedule, which my hesitation is that puts more of our kids in an ABC schedule, bringing Sandburg into that mix. So my first question, and I'm sorry that there's several, is how many of those classrooms at Sandburg are impacted or over the social distancing guidelines like Bryan are? I know we know 40 out of 179 at Bryan. What's the numbers at Sandburg?
At Sandburg, we are 16 over at the moment.
Out of how many classrooms or sections? I'm sorry, Scott.
I don't have the section numbers, sorry.
Okay. Is it as significant a number as 179?
It would be similar.
Okay. So I guess for me, I'm trying to understand when our space constraints, which I don't think our community understands how significant they are at our buildings. And I recognize I ask these questions understanding what they are. But when our gymnasiums and our cafeterias during the fall semester, when we were in a hybrid setting, were being used solely for PE or for, I'm going to go back to learning lab, or let's see, alternate locations for PE, when that's where those big space areas are being utilized, I'm questioning whether that's an appropriate use of those spaces, given the minimal number of students that we're over. I know 40 out of 179, 16 out of 179 at Sandburg, approximately 179, seems significant, but my hesitation on just accepting those numbers is, and I recognize the district has to plan for 100% participation at every building. I recognize that, and I know that's what you guys are doing, but the planning of that number is not the reality. And I know that's a balance that is, I don't even know how to accommodate for that balance, but I know I have a 6th grade student, and I asked her after, looking through all these sections and trying to figure out the numbers for everybody, I said, how many days while we were in-person learning during your hybrid days, how many days were there empty desks in your classroom? And the answer was almost every class, every day. So it begs the question of, is there not a space that we can find at Sandburg and Bryan to allow for an overflow and not an entire classroom moving to a bigger space, but parents being willing to acknowledge that on any given day, their child will randomly be selected to go sit in an overflow supervised area to learn via their computer for that one class, right? Because I don't think I would find the statistics remarkably outrageous if any student at Bryan or Sandburg had every single one of their classes over capacity to social distance on a hybrid situation. I don't think that's the reality. I would find it hard to believe. So I think that any parent that wants to get their kid in there for a full day from 8:30 to 1:30 and with their teachers would mind if for one of those classes, they could just go to kind of an overflow area, whether that's in the gymnasium or even in a hallway or in the cafeteria, just to, experience their Zoom or their classroom setting via Zoom, which the kids are doing in the classrooms anyway.
So we already do that.
Okay.
The answer, we don't have any more of those opportunities. We've maximized that to its fullest. And that is it. We've tried everything. We do that currently with all those situations.
But what situations were there in the fall that you had to do those? And I'm just trying to understand it because I don't think the community nor I understands where that's being maximized.
Sure. So one example is, the Sandburg Library. So we've transformed the Sandburg Library into a classroom and we have overages into that space. We pluck students from classrooms currently in the fall just to make sure that the overages were not there. We've run out of spaces to do that with the additional students second semester.
But so I guess my question is, if we're asking, and so follow up on that. So I appreciate the fact that you've looked at that, and I'm sure you have. I have no doubt about that. Because I do appreciate the fact that you all want to get the kids back in the building. So understand that this is not a question. I'm not coming at it from a position of doubting that, but I just trying to understand it. When we're asking families to accept that during inclement weather, you can't get a snack, which don't get me started on snacks, but can we not, when you're giving up an entire gymnasium of space for PE to accommodate in-person learning equally among all of our schools, I find that hard to accept. And so if we're saying that you can't have snack because of inclement weather, why aren't these kids out there doing their PE outside, except for, in the rare occasions, as we've mentioned tonight, inclement weather?
Yeah, I mean, that's good feedback. PE is just one of the many challenges. Even if we were to be outdoors in the inclement weather, 20 or below, I think is the ISB guidelines. I think we would I know we would still be in an issue because we've talked about that as well.
So we're putting aside these gymnasiums solely for PE and no other use.
No, the PE, so the gymnasiums will be utilized to fill the sections of PE.
Right.
So if we have in-person electives, the gymnasiums will be used for those sections.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So the gymnasiums are solely being used for PE as opposed to an overflow area to accommodate learning. And I don't want to diminish the importance of PE. I don't want our community or any of our valuable PE instructors to think that I don't think it's important, but I think there are hard choices to be made during a pandemic and during the constraints that we have on space in our facilities. And
it doesn't work. So there are 25 sections of PE at Bryan, just as an example. The gym is not free during any of the E blocks. It is not working logistically, and we've gone through all of this.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and that's what I think. I think me personally and our community here that there.
No, I understand.
There is there's not an opportunity to find space that would accommodate an overflow area. I mean, because
Correct. That's
the,
correct.
the reality of it is that an overflow area, based on, if you're talking about, this is where I struggle. If 3 to 4 kids per in 40 sections at Bryan and 16 such sections at Sandburg, the number of kids that are being quarantined, the number of kids that are traveling, the number of kids that, the weather stinks and I'm not getting a snack, therefore I'm not coming in. I just the actual reality, how many bodies, like I said, my daughter has never seen a classroom without an empty desk. And that's where I struggle with losing a day of in-person learning for Sandburg and Bryan, 2/3 plus of our student population and the middle 6-8 population. That's where I struggle.
All right. Margaret?
Yeah, so thank you. So I appreciate you going back to look at the schedules, all the work that was involved. I think all of these questions are important. You know all the work that you've done, but all the community, as well as all the board, we might not know all the different avenues that have been done. You talked about 13 different models, taking feedback from the steering committee. Again, you presented this information on Wednesday, you got feedback, presented the information on Thursday, you got additional feedback, and you came back on Tuesday with additional models. The challenge is that neither of these models are perfect. Neither of these models are perfect. And yet, they do get our students back in school, and they do get our students. I prefer option 2. I recognize that's not perfect either, but I prefer option 2 for the reasons that it's a schedule, 8:30 to 1:30, that parents have been aware of and have perhaps gotten accustomed to and set schedules around. I take a look at the majority of the day. When they're in school, all of their classes are covered, both the core schedules as well as the electives are in here. And the only time that they would actually have to be remote and on a computer on the day that they're in school is for office hours if they choose to participate. So I think that is, again, admirable. I appreciate all the additional work that's done here. The other point that I want to bring out is that our kids are in school. This is something that we can do. Maybe it's just January. If we can get information, I would like to be very hopeful and think that by January 11th, any spikes from the holidays will have gone back down, and we can start seeing, we can put this focus on making sure our children are in school, which means other sacrifices of the community will need to be made from choices that we all would have liked to have, but will not be able to do in other socialization pieces. And we can keep the community spread at a relative rate so we can continue to keep our kids in school, and perhaps in February or March even expand this process. So at this point, my vote would be for option 2. So again, thank you. It's not perfect, but it's what we can do with what we have.
Thanks, Margaret. Chris?
Yeah, I likewise support. I prefer option 2, and for the middle school. And I think there's pretty broad consensus around the options for elementary school and for high school. So, the middle school options, I would prefer to see something different, but I think this is what we have for now, and it's a temporary solution. Particularly in my mind, I think it's a good step forward. So I don't want to minimize that, and thank you to everybody who worked on it. I also think that I want to see a quick ramp of capacity utilization in 2021 as fast as possible. We have to do it safely, but I want to make sure that we're up to speed on what the latest information is on these key issues. The 6 feet of social distancing, for example, is that we need to stay up to speed on that. That's really the reason that we need to do the ABC schedule at the middle school. And the reality is, for folks listening, there isn't a consensus to do anything but the 6 feet at this point in time. And I think it would take additional data from our own buildings and probably additional research from other sources to move the needle on that. And so, we'll see what early next year brings to fruition. So, I laid out the reasons on Thursday, so that I think returning to in-person learning and ramping up as quickly as possible was critical for the kids. And so I'm not going to repeat all of those, but I support the schedule as a temporary measure, and I will renew a push for accelerating that beyond even what we're seeing here tonight when we meet again next year.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Kara. I'm a little slow on the unmute button. But yeah, I also support, while imperfect, an option 2. I encourage our administration because, everything looks good on paper. And once you actually start doing it, you can probably think and find ways for improvement. So once we start doing it, let's continue to look for ways for improvement, ways to get that snack in there, even in inclement weather days. I encourage you, and let me skip around on topics a little bit. If we, as you come up with plans and investigate the testing, please take a look at the possibility of just having kids that test that week go to school 5 days that week. It seems to me that, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but seems to me that we would save about half on testing and personnel expense if we just kept our kids in school for that entire week. And I also encourage you to look at the districts that are still in session. What are they doing differently than we are? I think that would be some time and effort very well spent. And I just gotta express my frustration that our interpretation of medical facts always seem to err on the most conservative side. We constantly are saying, the attitude I see is that we're constantly saying we can't. When there are other states, other districts in our state, and private schools in our town who say we can, and they're in session with kids in the classroom. So please, let's investigate what they're doing differently that we could copy. And in terms of distancing kids, I get it that for adults, 6 feet is the recommendation. But there's all sorts of medical literature out there that for kids, different spacing, especially because those kids have masks on, closer spacing is acceptable. So, I just have to ask the question, what's the difference between our kids in school wearing masks that might be 5 or 4 or 3 feet apart versus what I see as I drive around town, packs of school-age children hanging out together within 1 foot of each other with no masks? I just have to ask, which group of kids is more contagious? So I'll go back to I'll support option 2. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to add on, I mean, I agree with what Jim just mentioned there. I think we need to take a hard look at the distancing issue and make sure that we're making the right decision for kids on that as we go into next year, because that is the primary blocker on getting more kids into the buildings. And I neglected to mention in my prior comments that I do think it's reasonable to make sure that this ABC schedule at the middle school is necessary, right? So I think it's a legitimate ask to kind of go back to students and families in those buildings and just reconfirm, we got to beat on, folks who wanted to switch from hybrid to in-person. We should just make sure that there aren't folks who want to switch from in-person to hybrid, before we implement something like this, and make sure it's actually necessary. My hunch is that it will be, the same data, but I do think we should pursue confirming that and try to avoid implementing this if we can.
And can I add one thing to my comments as well? I think our community would be well served by adding some additional medical advice, Dr. Moyer, to your cadre of medical advice. It's interesting, as I read letters from parents, every single one of them that has identified themselves as a physician is saying, get our kids back in the classroom. We haven't heard from any physicians in our community saying, oh, please keep our kids out of the classroom. It's just too dangerous. The medical literature that is brought to me and arrives in the mail in my own household all says get kids back in school. So I encourage you to diversify your source of medical information and advice. It will only benefit the community.
Okay, so I have a couple questions. Just for clarification, I think this is maybe I think it might have come in the Ask D205, but Kevin, Dr. Rubenstein, could you answer how does the schedule affect special ed students or the ABC students that are in?
Sure. So our students who are currently in 4 days a week are actually going to be in 5 days a week. So they'll at Bryan. So instead of being AB students, they'll be ABC students. Otherwise, there's no changes.
Thank you for that. So I guess, I think everybody else has spoken. We are saying we're going to open in substantial. We're making the assumption that it's going to be substantial after the holiday break for a while. We also don't know what it's going to look like. 2 weeks feels like everything changes. So I do like option 2. Obviously, I wish it wasn't ABC, but right now we're all remote. So I feel like it's a step, and we have continued to evaluate what we've done every week, every 2 weeks. So to me, this is a way that we start. We said at our last meeting on Thursday, we wanted to open, we wanted to stay open, and we wanted to add students, as possible. So it seems like this is a stepping stone to opening and making sure in a substantial environment we can stay open, and then we evaluate at the end of January where we are. That seems like a logical, measured approach. The most likely, the way things change, we could have different advice or different guidelines from the CDC or the health department, or the vaccine could be further along. So to me, I realize option 2 and an ABC schedule for a couple schools for the month of January is not perfect. But nothing really is perfect right now. And I feel like it's a step in the right direction. So that's where I am. We all want kids in school. But we have to, we're moving in that direction. And I know that the districts that I'm aware of that are in school right now are either operating at 25% capacity at high schools that are open. There's a few around, or they have testing. So those are the ones that I'm aware of. That doesn't mean there aren't some others, but the ones that I know of that are where they're either testing or they're at 25% capacity. So
Sure. Could I just ask 2 follow-up questions, not to berate the points that have already been addressed? Could you just clarify for the community that on the option 2, which I think the majority of the board is in support of, if not all of us, what does that 8:30 to 9 a.m. window of intervention and enrichment look like for the different populations of students? Are they in their homerooms? Are they being pushed to different areas of the building? Just give us an idea of where do our students at the 6-8 level report to every day?
Sure. So this would be time for a focus on core instruction. So this would be ideally ELA or math, and it would be led by ELA or math teachers. Ideally, it would be data driven. It will be data driven, in which the students would be cohorted based on potential needs. We would try to do that on a somewhat structured basis so that we had some progress monitoring in play. In other words, it's not meant to be students fluctuating from classroom to classroom. If you looked at this from a periodic basis, depending upon when the schedule can get revisited, if a student or cohort of students needs particular support in a different skill area, they would be with a teacher who can help them focus in on that during that time, and vice versa. We're looking at the enrichment side of it as well as the intervention side, so that all students' needs are met, including those in the middle. And making sure that it's not just, a two-sided piece, and that actually everybody finds something beneficial in that time. We had, a growth area, admittedly, in our survey feedback in week 8, in which students expressed, a good majority, about 67%, I think, said that they do have questions met when they have them from their teachers. But we also had in that same scenario, the other side of it, almost 33% of the students who did not feel that. And the teachers expressed similar feedback, saying that it was difficult oftentimes to meet with students and get some of those individual needs met. So we're hoping this will be a really good opportunity for that to take place.
So I guess I'm completely in support of that, helping the kids that need the help, enriching the kids that are there and want to push forward. Logistically, where does that happen? When on January 11th, when our 6th through 8th graders show up in the building, where do they go and how do they know based on what their kind of intervention enrichment position is? Where are they showing up?
Sure. So individual schedules would be created and they would have a designated teacher for that time, and they would know that in advance.
So parents are being notified ahead of that January 11th start date that where their students would go to, and that's a separate, so there's no more homeroom to start out at, right? I don't want to misspeak.
Ideally.
Okay, so they will be an intervention or enrichment classroom setting that will address whatever spot they're in at that moment. And will that change weekly or month? 2 weeks. I don't want to complicate things even more than they seem to be, but that they are not seem to be.
It would not change weekly. Hopefully this schedule changes as we, kind of are in agreement on tonight, quicker, sooner than later, but it would take place to allow for us to progress monitor the data to the fullest extent. Oftentimes best practice for that involves 6 to 8 weeks. But we are really only looking at this on a temporary basis in terms of the scheduling model. So I'm fearful of committing to a time frame on when students would switch that just yet.
And so then, thank you. No, I appreciate that. And then here's my, if you didn't think I was already giving you a headache, Dr. Krenz.
That's okay. It's not a headache. It's all right. I understand.
No, I know. So remote Wednesdays. I know. Is there a reason that we're not using this day as a rotating in-person day? Is there a reason that we're not, especially given that now just the feel of the board that Bryan and Sandburg kids are going to go to an AB schedule, which gives them one less in-person day every 3 weeks. Is there not a reason that we can't use that Wednesday remote day to make up for that in-person time? And I'm sure that you've thought about that, but I think it's important for you to explain to the board and the community why that's not an option.
In option one?
Well, no, I mean, option two, right? In option two, we're switching Bryan and Sandburg. I think from what I've heard tonight that the board is leaning towards option two. And so then in that option, that now we have at least 2/3 of our community getting 5 days of in-person instruction every 3 weeks.
RJ, if you could go up 3 slides, please.
Am I wrong on the numbers?
One more, please. Thank you. So in the ABC model, and again, these are just placeholder dates. I'm not certain that we would have this exact ABC algorithm. We will lose the Wednesdays because they will become, as you mentioned, we will lose Wednesdays as we know them, but they will become a full day of instruction for students who are placed on that schedule. So I think to answer that question, we will have a full 5 days of in-person learning taking place across each of the middle schools to the fullest capacity that we can. The other point for me to specify is this model would only apply based on tonight's decision making for Bryan and Sandburg on January 11th. Churchville, we do not anticipate the need for this. They will be on an AB model.
Great, and thank you for clarifying that, and I totally forgot about that. So then going back to the elementary and York schedule, is there a reason that we're not using that Wednesday to rotate more in-person time?
On the high school level, we've had a lot of success with the Wednesdays. The student feedback was in major favor to keep Wednesdays the way they are. The models we compared ourselves to, for example, 87, they have a similar structure. In fact, their model looks very similar to ours. We have more minutes, but our Wednesdays are remote, similar to theirs. We've had just a lot of really good feedback on the student body piece of it, including the scheduling committee. And we hope to, maintain that.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay. Kara, it's Karen. I have one question. Dr. Moyer, what's going on with the Early Childhood Center?
Well, they.
They're 5 days, right? I'm sorry. We never talk about it, and I just.
Yeah, their kids have always only gone a half day, so you wouldn't extend the day for a longer period of time for those younger kids anyway. And Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that they're in person all the time. They don't have any remote days. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for continuing to find some solutions. As we work, everything changes. Okay, we are ready for superintendent's consent agenda. For those that might be listening in, the consent agenda is either routine items or things that we have typically talked about already. I will ask if any board member would like to pull an item from the consent agenda. Okay, then could I have a motion for the consent agenda, please?
I make a motion that the Board of Education approves consent agenda items as followed. A, personnel report. B, financial reports. C, 2021 administrator contract agreement amendment for Bev Redmond. D, bid 2101 approval Emerson renovations. E, 2104 approval York track replacement. F, Anthromed education agreement for social worker. G, semi-annual review of closed session minutes. And H, destruction of verbatim of closed session minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Troutman, second by Ms. Hostler. Jenna, could you call the vote, please?
Mrs. Troutman,
Yes.
Mrs. Hostler,
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen,
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Dr. Harrell,
Yes.
Mrs. Caforio.
Yes, 7 ayes, no nays, motion passes. All right, next is the superintendent's agenda action items. Item A is the approval of resolution for 2020 certificate of levy, which we already had the hearing and discussed. Could I have the motion for that, please?
I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution for the 2020 certificate of levy.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Stufen, second by Mrs. Hostler. Are there any questions or comments?
Just that I'm one comment that I'm pleased that we're abating the levy so that we won't be increasing taxes this year. I wouldn't be voting for the levy otherwise.
All right. Okay, with that then, Jenna, you can call the vote, please.
Mrs. Stufen,
Yes.
Mrs. Hostler,
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski,
Yes.
Mrs. Troutman,
Yes.
Dr. Harrell,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Mrs. Caforio.
Yes, 7 ayes, no nays, motion passes. Item B, approval of tax abatement resolution. We also have talked about this both at the committee and previous board discussions and earlier this evening. Could I please have a motion for that?
Move
I
the Board
move-
of Education.
Go, Kara.
Go ahead, whoever. Jump.
We can't hear you, Karen. Karen, we can't hear you.
All right, I'll talk for Karen and then Chris can second. I make a motion that the Board of Education approve the resolution for abating the working cash fund of Community Unit School District Number 205, DuPage and Cook Counties, Illinois, and abating a portion of the taxes heretofore levied for the year 2020 to pay debt services and the general obligation refunding school bonds, Series 2016 of said school district.
I second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Troutman, second by Mr. Kaczynski. Any comments or questions?
So this transfers $3,175,896 out of fund balance, out of our operating reserves, which actually comes out of the working cash fund into the debt service fund. And instead of getting property taxes, this transfer of reserves, a one-time fund balance reduction out of the operating into debt service to pay those taxes for the bonds, for the 2016 bonds.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, Jenna, you can call the vote.
Mrs. Troutman,
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski,
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Dr. Harrell,
Yes.
Mrs. Hostler,
Yes.
Mrs. Caforio.
Yes, 7 ayes, no nays, motion passes. All right, item C Open D205 plan for January and February 2021. Do you want to give a short intro before we get a motion?
Well, it's everything that we discussed. So we need to, whoever makes the motion, it's at the bottom. Some of that information is redundant. I'm not quite sure why it was recommended that we put it in that way, but the motion itself is toward the bottom there. We need to insert option 2. And after we say Brian, we need to say Brian and Sandberg.
Want a motion, Karen? Kira, do you want a motion now?
Oh, yeah. Does somebody have a motion, or can somebody make a motion?
I move that the Board of Education authorize and direct the following with respect to the Open D205, a plan for safe, healthy, and rigorous learning for the 2020-21 school year. Number 1, January 6, 2021, remote learning, professional learning day for staff, no school for students. January 7th and 8th, 2021, remote learning for all students. January 11th, 21, hybrid learning for all students with the following provisions. A, elementary school level, same schedule as for fall 2020, with the exception that there will be no snack breaks on inclement weather days. B, middle school level, option number 2, as summarized by the superintendent immediately before adoption of this motion, including Brian and Sandberg on an ABC model, and no snack breaks on inclement weather days, with such summary to be included in the minutes of this meeting. And C, high school level as summarized by the superintendent immediately before adoption of this motion, with such summary as to be included in the minutes of this meeting.
I second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Hostler, second by Dr. Harrell. Questions, comments, any more discussion?
I just want to encourage all of our building administrators at the middle school level, Sandberg and Brian, and our team to continue to find ways during this, what we all hope to be a brief, hopefully no longer than 8-week period, to find the spaces and to understand whether the ABC schedule is truly in reality needed. That's all I'm really hoping for, because in my heart, I don't believe it is. I believe there are spaces there that can be found, and I just want us to be as creative and safe. I'm not asking for us to not pay attention to all the social distancing protocols. That's not what I'm asking, but I just want us to be creative and really look at how many kids are in the building at any given time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's reasonable to make sure that, we're assuming that 100% of the kids who were attending in person before continue to do so. And I would like to make sure that that's the case before we move forward with the ABC model.
Beth?
I would just like to say that I know that we're saying no snacks on inclement weather days, but I'm hoping that we can find some ways around that. So the kids can get outside for a quick break, hopefully, whether it's with an umbrella or whatnot, to just have that time to have a quick snack and be fit into the schedule somewhere. Thank you.
We have a meeting the beginning of January and then middle. So I assume you'll have updates for us at both of those regarding how things are going, correct?
I think you just answered your question.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think that we'll have those numbers of attendance on January 12th, but I would hope to see those numbers of attendance to reflect that our buildings are at an overflow capacity. Sandberg and Brian, obviously, particularly on that January 26th meeting to kind of justify why we're switching to this ABC schedule.
All right. Anything else? All right. So we'll, Jenna, you can call the vote.
Mrs. Hostler,
Yes.
Dr. Harrell,
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen,
Can you not hear me? Can you hear me,
We
Jen?
can now.
And,
Yeah, I can hear you now. Mr. Kaczynski,
Yes.
Mrs. Troutman,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaforia.
Yes, 7 ayes, no nays, motion passes. Okay, so we briefly spoke about the item D, approval for COVID testing contract. And in speaking about that earlier, I would like to know if there's consensus to defer this subject to January and wait until some of those other factors have played out. So is there consensus to defer this agenda item to January?
Yes.
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 All right. So the majority agrees that we will defer this to January, and assuming that you will get us, you're going to continue the survey and be able to tell us the participation in particular regarding testing, correct?
Yeah, we'll be meeting tomorrow and we'll try to get something out to the community that tries to encourage 100% participation and get a yes or no answer, and try to make sure that we have the most accurate information possible on interest in participation.
All right. Okay, so then we are on to item E, which is the purchase of the Park District property. Do you want to give a little background, Dave?
Yeah, so we've been working with the Park District for almost 2 years now on an agreement to take ownership of the Abbey. The Park District purchased other property that they are eventually going to repurpose into a new and improved senior center. And so that allows us to work with them to occupy the Abbey. And as Jim Rogers, the executive director for the Park District, has been working with his board, they believe that they're ready now to move in that direction. And of course, they have to move out of that building before we can move in. Goes without saying. And so there's the way that this is structured is that there'll be there are provisions in the law where they would convey the property to us, slightly different than a strict purchase of property. And so what we're doing tonight in our resolution is expressing our interest and need in that property. They will then come back at the next board meeting and take action themselves on the matter. And then we will move to finalize all of the legal documents that will allow us to assume ownership. In the meantime, there are some collaborative agreements for us to be able to do what we need to do to expedite the planning process so that we can get into the Abbey for fall of 2021, August. And also we're currently working on the whatever is necessary for us to deal with the lease arrangement on the current property that we're using for the transition center purposes. So it's been a very, I know, long time for the parents who have been wanting this. We have been working very hard and very cooperatively with the Park District to make this happen. And I'm very happy that we can finally do that. Along with an improved facility, we'll be able to design it in a manner that supports first-class programming and improve our opportunities for students. So very excited for this to finally be happening.
Okay. Could I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution entitled Resolution Regarding the Sale and Transfer of the Abbey Property from the Elmhurst Park District to Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205.
I'll second.
Okay, I just want to say that for the very special transition students who've been waiting in their families, this is it's a really good moment to get you a permanent place. And we look forward to the collaboration with you to see what that space will become with your input and what we can dream for that in the future. So that's my comment. Thanks to the administration for your work on this. And are there any other questions or comments?
Just want to echo that, Kara, and I'm just really excited to see this process get started, and I can't wait to see the plans for another renovated or new building in our district. It's very exciting.
Absolutely agree. This is long overdue, and I'm so proud of the district for just pushing forward with this and making sure this happens for that portion of our community that will so benefit from this and deserve it.
Yeah, I agree. Very happy to see it move forward. And, you know, there have been some good items discussed and approved tonight. So I know we're all engaged in a lot of spirited debates, myself included, on lots of issues right now. But, you know, hopefully we can take a step back, and some of these things we've been working on for a long time. And there are some good things happening too.
Agreed.
A permanent home for the transition center has been a long time coming.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yes, it has. So this is a really,
we're making it happen tonight.
this is a really good vote to call. All right, with that, Jenna, you may call the vote.
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Mrs. Hostler,
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen,
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski,
Yes.
Dr. Harrell,
Yes.
Mrs. Troutman,
Yes.
Mrs. Geborio.
Yes, 7 ayes, no nays, motion passes. All right, with that, we move on to item F, approval of amended 2020-21 school calendar.
Yeah, this was referenced in the other motion, but you do have to make a formal motion on this based on the fact that when you amend your calendar, you have to refile it with the state, et cetera, which you know. But the executive order allows us for 5 remote learning, professional learning days. That's what they're called. Or actually called remote hybrid, I think. I don't know, you know, just you code it on the calendar, I guess. But we do need a vote. And the reason why this is important for us is that, as I said earlier, the new iPads have come in. We could, you know, place this 5th day as strategically at different points in the calendar. There's no requirements that way. And we feel that that to maximize our investment, that the sooner the better, as far as making sure that our teachers understand the power of the new device and the various different ways they can utilize it. So that's the rationale for this motion for the 6th of January.
Okay, could I have a motion, please?
Where is it? I move that the Board of Education amend the 2020-21 school calendar to designate Wednesday, January 6th as a remote learning professional learning day.
A second.
Okay, motion by Beth, second by Margaret. Dave, could you just answer one quick question? Does this, if this is just an additional professional learning day, we still do all of our same institute days, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, anything else? All right, if not, Jenna, you can call the vote.
Mrs. Hostler,
Yes.
Dr. Harrell,
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen,
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski,
Yes.
Mrs. Troutman,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Mrs. Caforio.
Yes, 7 ayes, no nays, motion passes. All right, next item on the agenda, we move to Superintendent's Communication, FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request.
It was a light month, 2. One on November 30th, district tax information requested and granted. Second on December 3rd, union and e-learning information requested and granted.
Item B, tweet of the week. Ms. Redmond.
Hello. Yes, good evening to everyone. And this is one of my favorite parts of the meeting, aside from York cross country and also Chris's very riveting report earlier today. We're on the theme of great things happening. And this is just an example of engagement during remote learning. And kudos going to Edison librarian Mary Greska for the way that she engages students and goes to the full length of tracking participation by putting stickers on her face. Every time a student participates, she adds another sticker. And for that, she earned a spot in an article of similar nature in the Washington Post. So we want to say congratulations to her and way to go for all of her efforts and just inspiring students to keep on keeping on and doing their best throughout this remote learning period. There are great things happening. Many things are going on that are wonderful inside of our district, and Mary Greska is just one of them. Congratulations to her. One thing she did notice, removal of the stickers, not as easy as putting them on.
All right, thank you for that. So board, next item is board communications. Board members present reports or share information with the full board. Anything? I just wanted to say as we close out 2020, thank you to all of you. It has been a lot of hard work, a lot of tough moments, and you know, tonight we were able to do some really great things for our community, in addition to navigating these challenging situations. So hopefully this will be the end of the dark, and 2021 will bring us into the light. And just want to say, wish you all a great holiday. We have 2 meetings scheduled in January 12th, 2021, regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting at 7 o'clock, and January 26th, 2021, regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting at 7 o'clock. And with that, we are adjourned.